a podcast about product management, user experience design, technology, and more. This is Product by Design. All right, welcome to another episode of Product by Design. I am Kyle Evans, and today we are joined by another awesome guest, Russ Hawkins. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Kyle.
All right. Well, let me introduce Russ briefly, and then Russ, you can tell us a little bit more about yourself. But Russ Hawkins is the president and CEO of the leading data technology company, Agilence. And Russ has spent over 35 years in the technology industry, helping establish organizations and small startups reach their full potential by driving change from the inside, which I'm super excited to talk about because I think driving change is a critical part of any business, and driving it from the inside is, I have personally found, very, very challenging at times. So excited to talk about your experience, Russ, and some of the things that you are working on and have worked on. But before we do that, why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me again. I think it's a great opportunity for me to talk a little bit about Agilence. And by the way, the name is Agilence, so it's a contraction of Agile Intelligence. Push those two together, you get Agilence.
Yep.
Agilence is the latest company that I'm running, but it is one of three startup companies that I've run. But going back in history, I'm from Boston originally and come from a long line of Boston firemen. And my career is based on the fact that I love to talk, and I love to try to convince people to see things my way. And my sainted mother used to say that I could talk a dog off a meat wagon, and so that's kind of ingrained in my head over my whole life. As I said, I grew up in Boston, and I was not a wealthy family. And what I saw in terms of career was an opportunity to essentially run my own business by being in sales. And so much of my early background is in sales. I ended up working for what came to be various iterations of AT&T, the telephone company. And was right around the time back, now I'm aging myself here, back in the 80s when the company was being broken up, as it should have been. And that change, which was really an external change, not change from the inside. This was clearly change from the outside, with the government essentially breaking up the company into multiple pieces. Turned out to be a great opportunity for me, because in this disarray that resulted from the breakup, I got to just sit around and ask questions and to execute on my ability to talk and my desire to drive the business. And so for about 15 years, I worked in a variety of capacities at AT&T through a tumultuous period in their history. This external change required internal change in this case, and I got a front row seat in kind of the repositioning of a major company in the U.S. As the years progressed, and in the 90s, what I was noticing is that in the run up to the year 2000, the tech industry was just bonkers. It was just going crazy, and I got recruited. I had an opportunity to go out and be the sales vice president for a small startup out of Connecticut that was in the data communications business. And, I absolutely loved it. I loved the smallness of it compared with coming from AT&T. And what I especially liked about it was that you could impact the company. You could effect change very quickly by understanding where you want it to go, and then helping the rest of the company to understand why it made sense to go there, and then working together with them to lay out a plan for change. And so that's kind of become my modus operandi over the years. This first company that I was recruited into as a sales VP was a company called Paragon Networks. And they were a data communications equipment company. And basically what I did was go in with open eyes and engage everybody, whether it was the team or our competitors or customers, and try to understand what was the true underlying value proposition of the company. And then based on that proposition and the technology assets that we had, working with the team to build a new strategy. And so with Paragon, we went from selling to connect branch offices in banks to providing connectivity for wireless networks, because they were a big and growing area back in the 90s. And the technology that we had turned out to be relatively easily adaptable to wireless networks. And the growth vectors in wireless were much, much more aggressive and interesting than handling, bank branch connectivity. And so it was really an engine for growth, and it opened my eyes to the opportunity to kind of reassess companies and to work with the existing teams to change the strategy and change the go-to-market and change the goals and objectives of the company. And subsequent to that, I've done it 2 other times. My second company was a company called, started as Infinicon. It's a pretty hard name to say and has some pretty unusual meanings in foreign languages. Anyway, without going into all that, I changed the company's name to Silverstorm. It was a high-performance computing company, and basically did the same thing. Most high-performance computing companies at the time were focused on government and on academic environments, and I basically threw that out the window along with the team, and decided to focus strictly on some subsegments of business. So oil and gas exploration, video rendering, and financial management or financial concerns were the 3 areas that we changed our focus on and made that company very successful. And both of those companies were successful enough to sell to large public companies for an interesting number, for good numbers, where everybody, especially the team, were able to make money, and the investors also were able to make money and be happy. Agilence is my third company. When I arrived here, it was originally a specialized hardware company. They made network video recorders. And we did that business for a couple of years. And then I decided that we really did need to go through a process of reevaluating what our value proposition was, what our technical assets were, and how we could leverage those in the market as it existed today. And so we made a major pivot in the business to data analytics, and we haven't looked back since. And so since then, we've been aggressively pursuing a data analytic value proposition for retail and restaurant chains. These are large operations, and today we have more than 200 retailers that are using our product. And this past year, we grew by about 16% in terms of new logos and new recurring revenue. And I think we can improve on that as we move forward, and expect to be able to grow in the 30 to 40% range as we move forward. And all of it is a result of kind of reassessing what the capabilities of the companies that I've been involved with are, engaging with the team to try to understand their views of what our values were, and then looking at the external market to see how they fit and what kind of use cases and value propositions we could bring to our target customers. And that process has been one that's served me well over the years, and we're still kind of mid play here with the Agilence business.
Awesome. You've brought up a whole bunch of points that I want to kind of dive into, because I think that there's some really good ones that I've been making some notes for us to kind of dive into a couple of them. But before we do that, right. I want to ask, obviously, you do a lot within some of the companies that you have been working on and are working on currently outside of the office. Before we dive into a whole bunch of these other topics outside of the office, what else do you like to do?
Well, I do have to say that building companies has become my enduring passion,
Yep.
but I am very devoted to my family. I have a woman that I've been married to for over 30 years, 4 kids. All of them are off the payroll, which is a gratifying thing to me, and contributing members of society, which is quite what I'm quite happy about. And I'm now a grandfather, so my family has been very important to me. Been a lifelong pet owner. I have dogs, and I enjoy spending time with them. But I would say the one thing outside of building the company, and it permeates that as well, is having a personal commitment to continuously learning and continuously educating myself about not only business but about the world and people and how it works. I'm a big reader. I like to get exercise, and so I walk about 6 or 7 miles a day. During the season, I golf and ski, and I keep pretty busy overall.
Okay, that's awesome. What kind of dogs do you have?
Well, the 2 dogs that I have today are Irish doodles. You may have heard them in the background there a little bit, and for that I apologize. They're a unique. The world is increasingly populated by doodle hybrids, and I kind of accidentally fell into this, but they're a combination Irish setters and miniature poodles, and they are the funnest 2 dogs that I've ever had in my life. And we just they go with me on my walks every day. They're just a joy to have around. And I've got a lifelong experience with dogs. These 2 are my 7th and 8th dogs in my life, so it's been great.
That's awesome. The doodle hybrids are definitely becoming quite. We actually just we have a 6-month-old golden doodle who is now.
Oh, you do? Okay, great.
Yeah. So we have a 12-year-old golden retriever and now a 6-month-old golden doodle. So yeah, super, super fun dogs. Both the golden retriever, who is in surprisingly good health, and now the very, very young golden doodle, who I will say, like, super fun dog. So that's awesome.
Yeah, that's great. Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
They're good. They're great.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, we have a whole bunch of different things to kind of dive into. And, I'm interested, first off, on, some of the different things that you've learned across the different companies, because obviously, you've worked from really, really large companies like AT&T all the way down to really small companies like you were talking about. What have been some of the highlights and challenges, across these different types of companies and across the different industries that you've seen, both, working with really, really large organizations and really, really small ones?
Well, there's so many things we could talk about. One of the first things I guess I would mention is don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something. I spent 15 years at Lucent Technologies, one of the largest. It was one of the versions of AT&T, but started as AT&T when AT&T Information Systems ultimately became Lucent Technologies. And when I was making the transition to a very small company, my first company, Paragon Networks, had only 10 people when I started there. Eventually grew it to about 135. But at 10 people, one of the people was the founder, and the founder didn't believe that I could make the transition to a small company, and basically told me that I should not consider continuing with the interview. That it's probably pretty clear that I wouldn't be able to survive, or certainly not thrive, and most likely not survive in a small company. And I summarily ignored him, and have proven that my instinct was more important than his opinion. And so one of the things I've learned is to take people's opinions with a grain of salt and make your own decisions about things. And I think that's good advice for everyone. That doesn't mean don't listen. I think you should listen. But you really have to have your own set of goals and your own set of skills and confidences, and you have to believe in yourself. So that's one thing that across my career I've come to hold to be very sacred. Yeah, one of the other things that I've learned is it's all about the team. It's all about the people. My basic philosophy is that if you take care of the team, and by that I don't mean gratuitously, I don't mean being, just raises or things like that or paying. I mean listening to people. I mean engaging people in the process and engaging them in both exploiting the opportunities and the challenges. If you do that, you'll have people that are committed to the business and committed to doing what's required to make it a success. And that is in most cases meaning taking care of customers. So if you take care of people, they'll take care of the customers. And if the customers are taken care of, then the shareholders are going to be taken care of. And so it's a kind of a closed loop. Take care of the people, they'll take care of the customers. The customers will take care of the shareholders. And, we are in this for not just the glory of doing it. The shareholders will take care of the team. The shareholders will take care of the people. So it's a closed loop of success that I've seen work again and again. And it drives my perspective of making sure that the team understands where we're going and participates in both deciding where we're going and how we're going to get there. And by getting that kind of buy-in, you can kind of speak with one voice as a company, and you can move toward achieving the objectives that you want. People really do want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Goals are extremely important as well. And I believe this, by the way, in both business and in life, that it's important to have goals. And I do mean that in a plural sense. You have to have big, hairy goals, big things that you want to accomplish, but you need a lot of smaller goals too. Even if it's just, having a good discussion with your son or daughter, or, engaging a new employee. One of the things I like to do is be part of the onboarding process of people. We're starting to get to be a large company now, but I take the time. We're in the hundreds, not in the thousands, but I like to take the time to meet with new employees, usually in a group, and tell them about what the goals of the company are and how we got to where we are, and solicit their input on the validity of those goals, and try to encourage them to be aligned around what we're all about. And so that's been a very, very important part. The whole people, customer, shareholder, people kind of closed loop, and being sure to always be setting and reevaluating goals. On the downside, technology can be a harsh master, and sometimes you can be in situations where the market, the environment is changing so dramatically that you find the company out of step. And so that can result in, disappointing results. It can result in disappointed customers and disappointed people. But even though that's a problem and a kind of a negative, these are great learning opportunities and ways to, I guess, build on your own humility. Make sure that you stay humble, that you react to the world rather not in a negative way, but in a positive way. Learn from what you've done and do better. Probably the biggest single challenge that I've had is when I've gotten caught in one of those situations and we've had to do layoffs. And so probably the worst experience I've had in my life is having to lay off people in the company, and to handle those kinds of conversations with directness and clarity. And so so now I have a no layoff policy, which basically means that I'm never going to let myself get ahead of myself. I'm not going to get out over my skis, as they say in skiing. And so I've changed to moderating my growth expectations, and it requires me talking to the existing team and telling them that maybe we're not going to hire as many people as we ought to, and that might put a little pressure on them. But the end result is more security over the long run. And I'm quite happy to talk about our success at Agilence during the pandemic. We were able to moved through the pandemic despite significant challenges without ever having to lay off any people in the company. And that's something that I've learned that I want to never have to go through again.
That's really incredible, and I'd love to touch on that just a little bit more, because I mean, we see right now lots of companies going through that, especially in technology. A lot of companies have, kind of like you said, overhired or overextended themselves and are now cutting back significantly.
Absolutely.
And for me, kind of like you mentioned, that is a sign of, to put it very frankly, like poor management, where you've estimated your growth, you overextended yourself, and now employees are kind of bearing the brunt of that, where now you have to make significant cutbacks. And tell us more about how you view that, and how you're handling that, because to me that sounds like really, really exceptionally good management, but also a really difficult thing to do in order to find that right balance of being able to not have to go through some of those challenges, but to bear kind of some of the pain of it as you're growing and doing it in the right way.
Yeah, I agree that right now we're in a downward cycle in terms of the big tech companies. Many of them did add too many people, and they did it too quickly. Some of it, I think, was false analysis. So I think the root cause there for some of the leaders of those companies is false analysis, exacerbated by really truly extraordinary conditions. I don't think the managers of the big tech companies are dumb. I don't think that they were born with these kinds of faults, but I do think that they did not analyze the situation correctly, especially the impact of the pandemic. So you see a company like Zoom or even Amazon. The pandemic was uncertainty, and in that uncertainty, many companies, my company, for example, which was focused on the retail business, we immediately saw a negative impact from the pandemic, and we saw our customers' revenues dropping dramatically over the first 6 months of the pandemic, whereas companies like Zoom and Amazon saw huge increases in the demand for their products and services. And the analytical mistake they made was that the idea that this was going to continue forever. So they got ahead of themselves. They hired too many. I don't think they did it with any kind of, malice or, I don't think they're, quote, bad managers. I just think they're bad analysts in this scenario. As far as my approach is always to be a little bit conservative. Now, some people, my background is in venture-backed companies, and I've gotten knocked around a little bit for not being aggressive enough, for not telling too broad or too aggressive a story about how the company could grow. I've usually tried to moderate what I think is possible and to be a little cautious about overspending. I'm very, very focused on the dollars. I'm very focused on cash. A lot of people look at P&L. Everybody looks at balance sheet. These are important things, but cash is king, as the old saying goes. And if you focus on cash and you adopt a little bit of a conservative perspective, you might not hit the highest high that is possible, but you'll still hit a pretty good high, and you'll be being conservative on the cost side. And so when inevitably things change, and sometimes they change for the worse, and in the case that we're seeing today with companies like Zoom and Amazon, is that the demand didn't continue at the level that was indicated during the first year of the pandemic, and so now they're finding themselves, as we get back to some kind of market equilibrium here, they're finding themselves behind the curve and needing to adjust. And so I guess the other lesson is to have a little bit more of a long-term perspective and to go a little slower when you're growing.
Yeah. I think that's really, really great advice. Obviously, think not just short term, but long term, what is this going to look like? And being a little bit conservative, obviously, but also, will this last forever? And the answer is probably almost always no, it's not going to be this way forever.
Well, it definitely is always no. The only question is to what level is it going to sink or potentially rise, or to what extent is it going to stay the same? But the stay the same option is I can't predict the future, and if I could, I wouldn't need this job, right? So we know it's going to change. We know there are going to be challenges. We know there are going to be opportunities, and so staying nimble, staying flexible. Developing options. That's another point that I'd like to make is, I always like to have options. I always like to think about options, and I always like to encourage my team to have options. The pathway that we're on today is not the only options. There are other options to execute on, and it's good practice. It's good hygiene to consider options on a continuous basis and reevaluate the option that you've chosen against those other alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's really, really good. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how you go about that. So, as you're reviewing these things, as you're considering, the path that you're on, the potential paths that you could be on, how do you do that? And because I think that's a really important thing, not just continuing on a path because you're on it or because it's the way it's always been done, but, what are the potential things that we could be doing? And you kind of mentioned this, coming into companies and evaluating what you're doing and then, making pivots, kind of like you did at Silver. It was Silverstorm, right?
Silverstorm, yes. Well, actually, all three companies.
Yeah, Silverstorm and Agile. I keep wanting to say Agilence, but I know it's
Agilence. Agile Intelligence.
Agilence. And, the companies you've been at, coming in and making these pivots and making these changes because you're evaluating these potential options. Kind of walk us through what that looks like to you, how you encourage your teams to do it, and then how you go about making some of these changes as you evaluate these different options.
Well, I've had the benefit of coming into these companies when they were already going concerns, right? So I kind of parachute in as the new executive officer, and my pattern and what has worked for me has been to even with the investors who have hired me, is to tell them, look, I really don't know your company. This company that you want to hire me for, I'm not sure about it. I don't know enough about it yet. And so as I would tell the people that are hiring me, my approach is to come in and for the first 3 months or so to learn, just to be a sponge and soak up as much information as possible. And so typically that includes 3 constituencies in addition to the investors. So, when you're interviewing or being considered for a position as a CEO like mine, or really any position, I think, you have an opportunity to talk to the hiring managers. You talk to, in my case, it's been the investors. And so you have a pretty good understanding of what their objectives are. And so then what's worked for me is to come into the company, take a few months to understand what's going on. And that first means talking to the team and pretty much talking to everybody, getting around to all the groups, understanding what their perspectives are around the company's assets and, again, the value proposition, the value that we bring to the customers that we serve. Also to understand what they think isn't working and understand, whether their view of the strategy is aligned across the organization. The second group that I wanted to talk to is I want to talk to my customers. I want to talk to the company's customers. And so I've made it a part of my kind of personal onboarding is to get out and talk to as many customers as possible. Usually I talk to a couple before I've come on board these companies, but I do make an effort to go out and certainly talk to the top 10% of the companies, maybe a few others randomly in terms of their size. And then finally, and this is the thing that has, in some cases made people scratch their heads about me, is I I go out and talk to my competitors. Typically what I've done in the first couple of months is I've rung up the CEOs of the companies that I compete with and asked to have an opportunity to meet with them and talk a little bit about our perspectives, our individual perspectives and our individual companies, but also usually trying to talk about how there are things that we have common interests in. So, usually your competitors are, providing a similar value proposition and, delivering similar use cases to the customers. And so in some sense, we have some alignment around some of the things we want. We want customers to consider our software. Whether they buy my software or your software is a different question of whether we want them to consider this type of software. And so I found that to be very useful in understanding the landscape, understanding the competitive landscape. Almost always I learn some things that are going to help me compete against that company. Almost always I'm probably sharing some things that are going to help them compete against us. So the data gathering and the understanding is probably the first step from my perspective. And then once I've gathered all that information and I understand the assets that the company has and what the team's perspectives, customer perspectives, and competitive challenges are going to be, then it's a question of kind of green fielding the options. And that's a collaborative process, and it has to be done with the management team and maybe the extended management team of the company. And that's really, as I said, a greenfield. It's okay. Well, what are the things we could possibly do? And let's purposely develop a set of options about directions that we can take, goals that we can aspire to, and then once we've kind of greenfielded these things, once we've kind of got a list of possible ways to move forward, let's do an evaluation and an assessment of likelihood of success in those areas. And again, this is a collaborative process with the team. It not only helps you craft a better strategy, but it engages the team in a common effort. We are engaged in a common enterprise. That is the fundamental thing about a team, is that we are trying to achieve certain goals. So let's go through a process and agree on the goals that we're trying to achieve. Let's make sure that is tempered by reality in terms of the environment that we're in. And then let's figure out the best option that we can execute on, or that we can attempt to execute on against the various possibilities that are out there. And then once we've done that, let's go full force on achieving that option, achieving the goals associated with that option, without being overly blind to possible things that we hadn't noticed. In other words, always be ready to adjust and evolve and to make corrections in your pathway. And so that process is what I've done in all three companies. In many ways, it's a continuous process. On an annual basis, we check ourselves. We discuss our goals, whether they're reasonable. We check our plans and the go-to-market that we're using, and we adjust if we have to, or if we think it's necessary. And so I find that to be a very effective way of not only centering on a most likely pathway to success, but also reinforces that we work as a team, that we're one team, that we're engaged in a common enterprise, and that everybody has an ability to impact our results.
I think that's really good, and especially bringing in all of those different aspects of it. So the competitive landscape, the customers, the team, all of those different areas make it a really compelling case. How do you use all of that to really kind of drive some of the changes, especially when there are big shifts in either what the company was doing, from what the company was doing before, or from what the teams were doing before? Because often that can be a difficult thing if you're shifting from really one big focus to another big focus. Even with all of the information or the new vision and strategy, making a big change can be difficult for certain people or certain groups, especially if they may not be completely sold. So how have you managed those, especially if it's a more difficult transition for certain people or certain groups?
well, in a word, imperfectly. it is very hard. Changing companies is a very, very hard thing to do. And it again comes right back down to people from my perspective. So if you go through the kind of process that I described, you are going to surface a couple of things. You're going to surface whether you're aligned with the external environment. In other words, you're making decisions about the goals and strategies that you're going to execute on, tactics that you're going to execute on. You have to have an understanding of the environment, and is that environment going to be supportive of what you're trying to do? After that, after you're convinced that's the case, then it really becomes a people issue, right? So change management is about people management. I am not going to be able to change the company by myself. I have got to have an aligned organization that is aligned at the senior management team, that is aligned at the extended management team, and is aligned at the foot soldier level. Everybody needs to be working in the same direction. And almost certainly, when you are making major changes in strategy, you will have pushbacks from people, and these are welcome and expected. Now, if those pushbacks are commentary about environmental things or external issues, then those are very valid things to discuss and to move forward and to address. And those should drive changes or tweaks in the strategy that you're going down. But if they're not that, if they're kind of what I call religious ideas that you've got team members that are not aligned with the strategy, then you have to address those situations. And so you really have to make sure that the people we are all rowing in the same boat. I think it was Congressman Lewis that said that we all arrived here on different boats, but we're in the same boat now. So let's figure out how we're going to move forward. And by the way, if you don't want to be in the boat, then you should get off. And I don't mean jump into the ocean. I mean that again, people are the most important. So even people that are not aligned with the strategy or aren't believers in the direction that we're going, this new direction that we've decided upon, if they're never going to be believers, then it's time for them to move on to do something else. And it's my job to help them see that and to help them achieve their goals, right? My philosophy with people is that I want you to achieve your goal. I hope your goal is aligned with mine. And if it is, we're going to be very happy and we're going to work together well. If your goal isn't aligned with mine, then we need to address that. And what that basically means is that we need to find a place for you to achieve your goals, and that almost certainly is outside of this company. And so let me help you do that. And so that's a tough thing. Well, it's not really that tough, actually. I think helping people find what they want to do is an important part of team development. It's an important part of ensuring that the team that you have inside the company understands that management is going to be supportive no matter what it is you want to do. We want you to be here because you want to be here. We want you to be here because you're aligned with the strategy that we're executing on. And if that isn't the case, then you'll do better and we'll do better if you move on to something else. And so it's one of the hard realities, but I think it is a key for success in any small technology company. Right. Many of the things I've described are talking about getting input and talking about valuing what people have to say and how they operate. But I don't want to, mistake that for that the running a business should be a pure democracy. It is not a pure democracy. It should have elements of support and consent. It should have elements of democracy in terms of people being heard. But at the end of the day, the CEO's job is to make decisions. The CEO's job is to be, kind of a benevolent participant in the democracy and to overrule things when they're not aligned with the overall strategy and goals.
Yeah, I love so much of what you said there, and definitely agree with it. I think that having the right level of dissent is critical in any organization, because I think having everybody constantly agree on everything obviously doesn't give you the right level of input up and down the chain. Being not being able to see the areas that you may be blind to, both as executives and as managers and at whatever level. But also understanding that it really is about caring about people, that, it's not just a matter of everybody's got to be aligned or, get out. It's a matter of, caring about individual people and people on the team. And that's ultimately what, a company is. And it's about the people. And just because, at some point somebody may not be fully aligned anymore, that doesn't mean that, like you said, you got to toss them off the boat. We can still be humans about these types of things and help people find the right places, whether that's, on the boat in a different place, on the bus in a different place, as people have said, or a different seat at a different place that is more aligned with, what they could be doing and what would be beneficial for them and the company. And, being very human and empathetic about all of these things, so that it's, a very beneficial thing for everybody involved, for the team, for the company, and for the individual. I think that those are important things, because at the end of the day, we're all people, and we're companies made up of people. And so I think that you've hit it on the head, where it's important to have all of those things. And at the end of the day too, it's important that we recognize that we have to make decisions, and that's kind of what leaders are there to do as well. And so we may not all agree, but I think it's an Amazon thing of disagree and commit. And that's kind of what we do at times too. We may not agree, but we'll disagree and we'll commit, and we'll move in the direction, and we'll make things happen. So I think those are some really, really good points.
I think you said that very, very well. I said it extremely well. Disagree and commit is a very succinct way of describing it. We want conversation. We want pushback on things. We want people to express themselves, as long as it is in the context of achieving a common goal and executing on aligned strategies. So I think you said it very well, and I completely agree. If all I have surrounding me are people that are going to tell me that I'm right, which unfortunately is a situation that exists in many companies. I mean, we could look at some of the recent things that are going on with companies like Twitter and others, and you need pushback, and you need kind of creative challenges among the team. That makes you stronger. But if there is a fundamental alignment on the long-term goals and the strategies for getting there, then there's an opportunity for people to find better situations.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, because we've touched on this a little bit, but you've talked about data and analytics and the importance of it, but how have you seen that change over the course of your career? And how do you leverage that now? And where do you see that going into the future?
Well, so the world is awash in data, and in my career, we've gone from essentially, this is pre-Excel probably. When I first started, we worked everything out in longhand on pieces of paper, and adding up numbers, and so the amount of data that we were working with was very limited, and our ability to manipulate it has been very limited. And over time, the invention of the spreadsheet, as well as the growth in the amount of data that's available and the technologies that are available to manage that data. So I'm talking primarily about database technologies. These things have just exploded and truly exploded exponentially. A lot of people use the word exponential to describe things that are multiplicative. It's 2 or 3 times as many. the amount of data that is now created on a daily basis is just mind-boggling. It's even hard to express. The tools that are available now to manage that data in terms of database technologies and data lakes and Snowflake and all these other different kinds of approaches have dramatically changed the relationship between an individual and the data. The challenge, and the one that Agilence is addressing, is trying to make it easy for the average layperson, for the average individual in a company, to take advantage of the data that's in those companies without having to be a data scientist themselves. So I think what we've seen is, a very, very, very technical, aggressive, evolutionary process in terms of database technologies and the amount of data itself, and the ability to make that, to democratize that, to make it available to the average person has been much slower. And I think increasingly now we're seeing techniques that are being developed and evolved that are allowing that to happen much more easily, where an individual can, either in natural language or in simple mathematical equations, be able to articulate clearly what it is they want. And the data technologies themselves, and increasingly we're seeing machine learning and AI help in this area. I mean, machine learning and AI have been around for a long time, but I think we're finally seeing that breach the kind of last bridge, or breach, to bridge the last breach between the average person's ability to create value out of data, again, without having to be a scientist or be a technologist themselves. And I think that has been the last frontier. It still is the last frontier. And we're getting closer and closer and closer to it, largely because of the evolution that's happened in technologies. I left out the commentary about the internet and the connectivity, the ability to immediately be able to get clarification about what terms mean, about what's available in terms of resources. I mean, these things have changed our lives dramatically in ways that we don't even fully understand ourselves. But I like to think of it as that bridging of that final gap between the data and the average person. And I think we're getting very close to getting there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've touched on a lot of technologies there and kind of across everything, but is there anything particular that you're most excited about, either, in the near future or you see kind of coming down the road?
Well, I think it is in the area of artificial intelligence. I am not a believer in. I'm not worried about artificial intelligence personally. I think a lot of people are worried about it. They're worried about the so-called sentient creature. The idea that a robot can eventually think independently. That is, I think, not possible personally. I think computers, and databases, what's happening is where we are, these are inanimate objects. These are things that we act upon. They do what we tell them to do. That may include learning things, and they can learn things, but even things like this new chat GPT, for example. This is a technology that people are worried about. They're worried about, we're worried about, the 2001 Space Odyssey with the computer refusing to open the pod bay doors for the spacewalker. And I may be referencing something that you're not really that familiar with, but the idea that the computers are going to take over the world and then they're going to turn against us, I think is a pipe dream. I don't think that it's ever going to happen. But at the same time, I do believe that through things like ChatGPT and the other advances that are happening in the AI world today, that these tools are becoming more and more and more usable, and they're usable to make our lives better. They're usable to make our work easier. They're usable to make our insights clearer. and our lives better. And I for one am very, very optimistic about the future and about the kinds of things that that we're going to see in the AI world as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree. What advice would you give to anybody just starting out? Obviously, you've been through a lot of companies, a lot of different areas. For somebody new starting out, what advice would you give to them?
Well, I think the first three words I would say is goals, goals, goals. And I mean that very broadly. So you have to understand how you want to use your life. I mean, the reality is we're only around once. People, and these are a little bit cliched, but my personal view is that you have to have goals. You have to be guided by goals. It's the advice I've given my own children. And those goals have to cover, there's multiple goals covering a wide range of things. So there's personal goals, there's business and life goals, there's relationship goals. I think it makes great sense for people to spend some time to really understand the goals that they want to execute on, the goals that are meaningful to them. It's going to be different for every person. And even, by the way, if the goal ultimately proves to not be a valid goal, that you change it sometime in the future, the simple fact of having a goal today sets you on a direction. It moves you forward, allows you to put one foot in front of the other, which is really existentially all we as humans, I think, really need is the ability to move forward in life and not to get stymied and not to be overwhelmed or depressed by the world. It's have a goal and move toward it. Be willing to change that goal, but continue to move toward it. And so that's one of the fundamental things that I think you have to have to make things work. And that can be applied, in kind of the grand, what do I want to do with my life kind of situations, but it also can be applied on a very, very macro, like what is my goal for talking with you folks today? And what is my goal for the rest of my day today? And how do I want it to end? And what do I want it to do? So I think goals are very important. I'm not a proponent too much of advising young people just do what you love. I'm not sure that is good enough. I think it's good to know what you love, and if you can align your goals with what you love, then that's fine. But for me personally, I goals are what I had, and it's brought me into places where I've had to do work that isn't what I love. And that's where I think the problem with that recommendation or that advice is if you're only doing what you love, then you never stick anything out that provides challenges, right? My view is that you have to pay your dues. You have to kind of work your way through your life, and you've got to be responsible for yourself. I'm not a fan of people being drags on society. Your minimal objective is to be supportive of yourself and to not be a drag, not have somebody else have to support you. You need to be responsible for yourself. And then, once you're responsible for yourself, then it's this very, very small leap to become responsible for others, which I think we have to adopt at least I have adopted. I am as responsible for other people's success as they are for mine. And certainly I am as responsible for their success as I am for mine. And so that doesn't always come with doing things that you love. Sometimes it's important to do things that you have to do to achieve the goals that you've set out for yourself, with the hope that at some point there'll be a convergence between what you love and the goals that you've set for yourself. So I think that would be my beginning recommendation, my beginning advice.
That's great advice. And even the things that you love have aspects of it that are going to be less than glamorous. So even if you do find those things that you love doing, which probably all of us have, I know that there are things that I love and am passionate about. There are aspects of it that I do not love to do. So there will always be those areas that are the work of the things that you love. So I think that's really great. Russ, this has been a really, really great conversation. I feel like we could dive into each aspect, and I have multiple aspects of this for a lot longer. But are there any things that that you wanted to add before we kind of wrap up that we talked about or didn't get a chance to talk about?
I think we covered a lot of great stuff here, and as you can tell, I would be happy to talk for hours. This is both my blessing and my curse. I love to talk. I love to discuss philosophical items, and I love to build companies. So, no, I think this has been great, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to chat with you today, and hopefully, there's some value in what I've had to say.
Yeah, I think this has been absolutely great. I think we've touched on some really, really awesome, great points. And like you, I love talking about all of these things and diving into both the philosophical side and then how you actually accomplish some of these things. So this has been a really great conversation. I have a couple, two kind of wrap up questions, but before we get to those, where can people find out more about you, the things that you're working on, anything else?
Well, you, of course, can find me on LinkedIn. Russ Hawkins, Agilence will get you there. Of course, I am interested in people knowing about our company, Agile Intelligence, Agilence. Put those two together, and it's agilenceinc.com is where you can find us on the web. And we'd love to have you visit us and see what we're all about. As far as me personally, I'll be happy to give you my personal email, which is rhawkins@agilenceinc.com.
Okay, awesome.
That's the best place to get a hold of me.
Perfect. We'll put all those in the show notes as well, so you can check those out in the links. Russ, you mentioned at the very beginning that you love reading. So I definitely want to ask if you've read or watched or listened to anything recently that you wanted to recommend. Well,
I'm a huge fan of a couple of authors. There is a podcast, or I guess it's more of a blog post that I like. It's a blog post called No Opinion. It's run by a guy by the name of Noah Smith, Noah Opinion, Noah Opinion. And he talks, this is something that I've recently been looking at, and he talks about mostly about economics, but it's about applied economics and the way the world works. And I've found many of his insights to be really, really beneficial. I'm also a big reader of biographies. I think biographies can be very, very illuminating. I'm getting close. I'm at Ronald Reagan now. I've been reading the biographies of American presidents in order, starting with Washington, and I'm up to Ronald Reagan. And I have learned so many things and frankly gotten a lot of context about politics that have made me much less worried about our political situation today than some people in today's world. The stresses on American politics have been significant throughout the history of this company. What happens on a day-to-day basis, what we're experiencing today may seem overwhelming or, just really deeply concerning. But the reality is that we've had these kinds of challenges over the course of our history. And I've found that biographies are a great way to learn not only about history, but also about personal decision-making and personal leadership and the way people approach their lives that I've found very rewarding.
That's really great. Is there one that you found particularly insightful or good?
In terms of biographies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm a huge fan of Teddy Roosevelt, and I love the fact that he listened to his own counsel, despite being, he was a very wealthy guy, so he's very different than I am in terms of the way that he started out his life. But he basically used his financial independence to pursue lots of very broadly valuable things in terms of the world. He's a creator of the national parks in the United States. He was a reformer throughout his career. I just love his personality and the way that he operates, and I would recommend it. There's a Robert Caro. It might be a little bit too heavy for everybody to start with, but there's a 3-volume set of biographies from him. I think it's Robert Caro. I may have that wrong, but anyway, he's a great read.
Yep. Those are some of the first ones that come to my mind as well. I have read those as well, and they are very, very good. Actually, I think I've just read. I'll have to double check the 2 books I've read on Teddy Roosevelt, but highly recommend as well. Very, very intriguing and engaging reads. So awesome.
Absolutely. And somebody who had a courage of his convictions and did what he thought was right, even if it was sometimes not so politically correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Awesome. And last question, any products that you have used recently that you've enjoyed or maybe not enjoyed?
Let's see, products. Well, I've been experimenting with wireless headsets, not, iPhone wireless headsets. And what I've learned is that I can go to TJ Maxx and I can buy a pair of wireless headset that work as good as iPhone for about $15. So the fact is I lose these things so often that I can afford to lose a $15 item, but not a $100 item. So that's been a happy thing for me.
Yeah. We get a lot of mixed reviews, especially on the AirPods. So like we get people who love them and hate them coming in and reviewing them. So definitely the Bluetooth earbuds are like, we get a lot of love and hate of people on.
Well, they fall out of my ears. I don't know. I think I have deformed ears or something, but so I find myself losing them all the time. And so the fact that I can replace them for $15 is a huge bonus for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Russ, this has been a really great conversation again. Appreciate all of your insight, especially with the experience that you have over your career and the companies that you have been with and all of the different things that you've done. So this has been, again, a really, really great conversation, and appreciate all of the time and the insights that you have shared with us.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And I've enjoyed the conversation and really appreciate it. Really appreciate the opportunity. So thanks, Kyle.
Awesome. All right. And thank you everybody for listening. We will talk again on the next one. Thanks again for listening. If you like the show, be sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on Twitter at prod_by_design. That's prod_by_design. You can follow me at Kyle Larry Evans on Twitter as well. If you want more product conversation, check out my newsletter, Product Thinking, at productthinking.cc. You can follow me on Medium at Kyle Larry Evans as well, or check out my Medium publication, Product by Design. Thanks again.